Hey, hello, Desmond.
Hey, Pooms, how's it?
Yo, fine, thanks, and you. Thank
Yeah, no,
you.
it's all good. It's been quite a while. I know I've seen you quite recently, but
Yes,
that recent encounter was after a very long time not seeing each other. But it
and
was
it was
also very brief.
did. But what I love about it, it was so impactful, and I had to invite you to conversations with Pumzile because that that moment was like, I know this guy. I had so many conversations with him, but definitely for conversations with Pumzile. That's why I couldn't let it go. Short,
Thank you.
but the impact was so great. Thank you for joining me in my space, conversations with Pumzile. I know you've seen quite a few because we've engaged a little bit also on the radio side. And so just to give you just a brief, why I do conversations with Upumzile, the hashtag at first, not at first still, is the girl next door. So the concept, the girl next door, started from knowing so many people who had impact in my life, who were friends, family, who went through so much and achieved so much through it all. Mostly all the negative things that you would ask somebody, how did you do it? And we have found ourselves as, I'm going to just say it, as African people to idolize so many people outside of our own community, society, you know? So the girl next door concept was, I want to have conversations with people I can touch, I can meet, that I know, you know? And it would be nice for us to have our own heroes and heroes sharing their stories. So this is where the concept comes from. Because
Makes sense.
and you know, I have the gift of the gap every time. So every time the conversation.
Those who haven't been touched by the impact of that gap, they don't know what they're missing out on.
True. And that's why the beauty of COVID-19 has brought us to a space whereby now we can globally share these things, because what I do, all the conversations, I put them on my YouTube channel for other people who don't even know Pumzile, who don't know the Deses of this world, to get to meet us and learn from people that can say, I'm a Namu Des and Kulilekasi. I've done this. You know, they can then do what we do. So why you? Good question. So
that's a question I've been asking myself for quite a while.
I know.
And haven't arrived at a good answer.
So you are, in my books, a person of interest, because the space you are in professionally, socially, in places that I've met you, you are so impactful. You empower so many people and youth in structures like universities, and youth like in where we met, our camp, where we were talking to grade 10s, you know, for, professionally. But in general, who is Desmond? How did Desmond find himself in that space?
Perhaps first of all, I must accept with absolute humility the invitation that you had sent my way, and of course accepting it. Pumzile was at first the whole idea that you and I have engaged at very many different levels over so many years, and I had no reason to say no, for starters. But also, second thing, I think you and I share so much of the things that we believe so strongly in, whether it's about community development, whether it's about self-determination as people or as part of a people. So it is quite an honor to have been given this opportunity to share on your platform some of the things that I preoccupy myself with, at least in my solitude, but also some of the things that I share with other people in platforms where you and I would find ourselves without planning, meeting up as we did a week or two ago. Who's Desmond? My full names are Leipa, Leipa, and then Desmond Phuthi. Leipa means fortune seeker. I am Mosotho, originally from the Free State. My dad was born in Vicksburg on the border with Lesotho. His great-grandparents come from Lesotho, Botabote. So ke Mosotho, ke lekgoloko le Kotswana, le Hlabagogo ka Lemao. Ke iso morena mogolwane kgorong ke re morena bona ke hlabile. Ke mphela magoba ba dute sebata sa go duta masela masukeng ga dikgoroga. That's in truth who I am. The other stuff are that which one has been privileged. Yeah.
Yeah, hold on. You said that's who I am after that claiming. I like that before we move into the other part. Why is that important when you introduce yourself and sharing your claim name the way you did, and before you continue with other elements of Desmond and say, that's who I am?
I think this is really just my approach and philosophy in life. Until you know who you are, you will become what people describe you as, right? And for me, there's a major difference between who I am and what I am. Because the next part I was going to talk to was about what I am as a public face that people see. So I started by relating to you who I relate to myself as, for starters, and also acknowledge the people that have made me. You know, I'm from a lineage of people. I didn't just pop out, right, from nowhere. So that sense of self-knowledge, I have learned in my own life that it enables you a platform on the basis of which you can launch yourself forward, or a stronger foundation on whose strength you can deal with the challenges of life, because you know what you are made of and are capable of based on who you know yourself as. You're not always going to win, but even in your losses, you will be victorious because you would have given it your all based on the authenticity of who we are.
Wow.
Yeah.
You see, that's the conversation that I needed to hear. And then as you continue, wow.
The other stuff, Pums, is as one grows up, you learn certain, I guess, socially and morally acceptable ways of being. For example, it is an expectation for you to go to school. I spent all of my school-going years in Bethlehem, where I was born, from substandard 1 to metric, as we had called it then, or standard 10 rather. And then I moved to Bloemfontein and I studied education. I had originally wanted to follow the life health sciences, and I did not do particularly well. For the first time in my life, I failed in mathematics. So my grade 12 was the first time that I actually failed, at least in terms of schooling. Although I had passed, I did not obtain a university entrance qualification per se.
And that's key, ne? Okay.
Yes, it's key in one or two ways. One that says acknowledging that you could have done better, but you didn't. But the other one says,
what now?
Notwithstanding, life continued, and it continued for the better. Right. So I moved from wanting to become a medical or food technologist and a nurse to becoming a teacher, thanks to my dad, who recommended I go and study teaching. And because I didn't have anything better, I went there and loved every moment of it.
Wow.
So the Desmond you see today is thanks to, again, the foundation that one had gotten at school, at university, with all the different role players that took part. And I take off my hat always to all the teachers, and I know every single one of them from grade 1 up to grade 12 who had literally impacted my life, but also the 4 years that I spent, of 3 years full-time that I spent at university, some of the lecturers who took an interest in the naivety of a Black child at that time, at a very critical, life-changing, if you like, moment in the history of our socio-political life in the mid-80s to early 90s before the elections. So a lot of my growth happened, Pums, when I would say mostly went to high school and when I finished university. And beyond that, it only gotten better.
Wow.
So the foundation, and I'm linking this with the previous conversation that we've had, the degree to which you resonate with what you see now after we've worked for so many years, owes its fame and strength and all of that in the who I am, who was embraced by the people that I came into contact with in my life's journey of growth, so to speak.
Wow.
And I remember, Holmes, if I may, you know, in the olden days, at particular phases of primary and high school, the Bantu education, the apartheid education system had career counseling, career guidance opportunities. And I remember there was a psychological profiling battery of tests that were did. And I remember quite clearly, it said my career would be in special education field, right? And that was when I was in standard 5, current what we now know is grade 7. But I didn't pay any particular attention to it for so many years. I think when my father said to me, go and study education, it still did not ring a bell. I just went because I did not necessarily want to spend another year at home, because my first year after finishing grade 12, I went to Wits to upgrade my metric results. And I didn't do anything dramatically different to improve on my results. So I got exactly the same result that I got the previous year. And I thought, man, what have I got to lose? Let me go and do education. And as I'd said, I have loved every moment of it. And the special education, in my understanding now, which the profiling spoke about, was that I could very well teach in class, but I probably would be more impactful outside the formalities of a four-walled classroom.
That we know of, yes.
Definitely, you know. Interestingly, in my youth days, growing up in Bethlehem, I spent a lot of time in church, and my then Reverend, the late David Mvula Kambule, and a couple of other of my mates, we spent literally every day in church because we were into youth, we were into choirs. I ended up conducting the church choir, etc. My church was so hopeful that some of us, because we had spent so much time in church, would grow up to become pastors and teach. Although that did not manifest, I see myself still being a pastor, being a teacher. You understand where I'm going with all of this? So that's the what I am, I think, because all of these things have become part of a learned response to the environment and a learned response to what could be going on in your head and in your heart. So you learn how best to, if you like, activate some of the ecosystems in your space to manifest some of the things that are going on in your head, in your heart, in your spirit, call it what you will.
Sure. You know why I was jotting down? Because as I'm listening to you, my mind goes to particular that conversation we had. And we started talking about us as parents, conversations that we have with our kids, you know,
Sure.
randomly or when it's meant to happen or not.
Sure.
Spoke about profiling that has profiled where Desmond is now or could be.
Sure.
And that you didn't pay attention, but two, because you were young at the time. At that age, currently now, I think part of conversations with Phumzile is for us as parents to be able to understand our kids' calling and those parts of life where that calling will, like the profile was one of the tick box, to be confirmed by dad to say, your results, they say nothing about your abilities. Sure, your results say something about who you will be. And this is the route that you should take. As you said, you like enjoyed it while you had your own career. Yeah, you had your career in mind. You had your what you've thought about.
Yes.
With that D, what can we teach other parents or people, not even parents, because like we meet other people's kids and we start having these conversations with them. So as adults currently now in South Africa and with where the world is going when it comes to career in your profession, what are these conversations that we're supposed to have as kids, going back to how from school to varsity to now what you do as this is now who I am and this is what my gift to people, which is me. Leave the qualification. These conversations, how important are them, you know, and why we should actually take the time to do it whenever we find a moment.
Sure. Pums, you've just, this is so loaded. I mean, I put up my hand for a part 2 to this.
Okay.
Because I think, we need to also, whilst we're having this general conversation, and important as it may be, from a variety of other conversations you've heard, and I've seen them on YouTube, there are many other themes that we need to follow up on, either with the same guests or with other colleagues in the space. So I put up my hand to also say there are certain follow-ups as you're taking your notes that we really need to engage quite in a thematic manner of approach with. And perhaps for your viewers, it helps for them to know that I'm currently working for the Northwest University as a project manager for the SAICA-sponsored Tutuka Bursary program, which seeks to, without fear or favor, promote all manner of effort to ensuring that we cultivate and help deliver young Black and colored, Black as in terms of African and colored students on their way to becoming chartered accountants. And it's a professional practice I got very jealously, because I understand what its impact could be for this country if we were to continue to do what we've been successfully able to deliver with SAICA in the profession for the last so many years. If we were to accelerate that and many other role players in their own areas do their part, this country could be a lot better than the sorry state we find ourselves in. Two, I am also in my own space a life/development coach, leadership coach. People call me a motivational speaker. I don't know what it is that motivates them with the things that I say, but I know I'm a teacher through and through. So all of these things that I'm referring to, whether it's in my professional capacity as an employee of the Northwest University or in my business called Leipa Bokamoso Enterprises, all of these things, there's a general golden thread weaving through them, that of being a teacher. And every moment that I find, I teach, and people around me either like it or don't like it. I have other business interests. I sell food, and I have a place where people come, to enjoy themselves with the food that I produce. And every opportunity that I find to teach, I do teach. And it's not because I'm uniquely different. We as a people, we who are darker than blue, Tina, Banaba Malawa Sibilo, it has always been part of what we do as a process of trying to, if you like, transfer skills from one generation to the other,
and
but also
knowledge,
within the generation. That's how, when other people arrived here and found us without written history, they thought we didn't have a history, because our history has always been through stories, and it was more verbal. And I accept that we have lost quite a lot of wisdom, or we could potentially lose a lot of wisdom in the process of transferring from one mouth to the other. But at the same time, it was also an indication that our history and traditions and cultures are not static. Again, another conversation for us to talk about. So you and I work in spaces professionally where we are entrusted with the lives of other parents' children. We are referred to as local parentes. We are parents away from the parents who may have given birth biologically to these youngsters. But our role is precariously, if you don't have your wits about it, precariously uncomfortable, in the sense that if you're only going to be doing your job, chances are you will do a lousy job. But if you go at it as if the children or the students, the young people entrusted in you are your own, you will spare no effort at assisting them to become who they should be, not necessarily what you want them as a life coach to become, right? So it is important, in my view, and particularly, this may seem like a very racial statement, but it is a statement that is intended to engender a sense of pride in ourselves, we who are darker than blue, because our worth has now been outsourced. The definition thereof is, in many times, I think, outsourced, but because we let other people define what we are, not who we are, right? So if you're going to just be doing your job in these spaces where we are entrusted with helping carve lives, I think we will lose a lot. We will, in cases where we spare no effort, find ourselves that even beyond the contact time with our audiences, we retain a lot in the form of follow-ups, but also in the form of people who, when they have reached certain milestones, without you expecting it, they call you and say, "Hey, Brady, you have no idea what has just happened. I've just qualified as a CA." And that student may not have even been at my university. But because we have had that connection at a camp, or when I do some leadership development consulting work for Tutuka, I may have interacted with these students at their own universities, but kept, albeit remote, some kind of relationship. These students will tell me that they have passed their CTA, right? And my role as a coach does not end when I either get paid or when my feature at an event
at that time
has come and go. So every single opportunity available, Pums, becomes a teachable moment or a teaching and learning moment outside the confines of a classroom. That's why I love being a special education teacher.
Oh, wow. Like, as you're saying, the themes are too many. And as you are at it, I have like questions popping up. But I like that you're saying, please, let's have other episodes and follow-ups and other people, because
have a series, absolutely.
A series, and growing each other and growing our young people with the opportunity that we have, it's so key. So with you, Dee, let's say currently now I have I'll say Black child out there currently in a space of not maybe knowing self or understanding self. What would be in like a few minutes, how can you help this child to say, for you to start, because it's easy for parents to say, you must excel, you must be better, but we never, like with me, like practical tools. With sometimes there are kids who you want to tell them to say, know your name and surname, know where you come from, know who you are, but some are like, okay, I know who I am, but that's not enough. So when a child says, okay, how can I start to understand self so that I can maybe move from being stuck?
Sure. I don't know if I should say, but I'm going to say it nonetheless, because I think it's very relevant. Today, I got a WhatsApp from one of my friend's sons. Sent me an SMS, a WhatsApp saying, Uncle D, I have a problem. I don't have a father figure. I'm trying to understand myself. I don't understand myself. I don't even know where I come from. I mean, I know who my mom and dad are, blah, 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 but as a boy being raised by a single parent, and this doesn't only happen to boys, by the way, it happens to all of us as people. This young boy in my life wants to know all of these questions that you're actually asking. So, and I suggest to him, and he poignantly says, Phumzile, every second moment I'm self-sabotaging because I don't know enough about me. And I'm battling to love myself. How would I even begin to extend the love to others? And I know what he's saying is true, because 2 years ago, he was in grade 9, 10. We were battling to rein him in. Right? So at face value, it looked like it was just rebellious teen years and all of that. But now that I think he has grown a little, 2 years later, I think he's in grade 12 now. There's also, nature will also embrace you in your attempts to do mostly good. And I think we're fortunate that the universe is embracing him, because he refuses to be kept down, right? So that is why he's able to articulate what I have said to him is private and sacred conversations, right? So first, we acknowledge it for what it is, to say, you're having this challenge, but it does not necessarily mean that he does not know himself. It could be my immediate, my preliminary reading of the situation is he needs to put to a context that which he knows about himself, albeit limited, right? Because the other challenge in my mind is that we have been so, I don't want to I don't want it to sound so cliche and so run-of-the-mill conversation of what happens in public spaces. But I think we've been so colonized ourselves, particularly as the young generation parents, more than our parents were, because even when my mom and dad, who are not really educated, have had the impact of apartheid and thinking less of themselves. It was not to the extent that it defined who they were. But with us, my sense, and it's yet to be proven otherwise, is that, you know what they say in Setswana, I don't know ngesizulu kuthiwani, lisika ha le ya baneng le ya latlhega. The traditions, as you cascade them to the younger generations, you lose them. It is partly because those who are custodians of isiko, they don't convey it safely to the next generation. So what that means in this instance of self-knowledge is that ngoba mina, I grew up in an environment where at one stage in my father's house, my parents' house, it's not my father's house, it's my parents' house. Because it was in my father's house, my mother didn't own that house. In my parents' house, and at a stage we lived with my dad's aunt, who would talk about who we are, etc. Right?
Last we are corner kwenziwani.
We are part of a people.
What you believe in.
Sure. So I think part of our challenge, particularly as people of color, who, whether we like it or not, we, our genetic makeup is still advised by the ways and traditions of our forefathers, whether we like it or not. Whether, and I'm not taking a swipe at religion now, but science has proven Uguti, our ancestral DNA is influencing in many ways some of the things that we are doing now, right? Especially where you find there is a disjuncture between who you are told you are and what the world makes you believe you are. And I conveniently say who and what to separate these two things. So in first port of call would be in the question that you were asking, and similarly to what this young boy is asking us to do, and I suggested that we have a meeting, as a tell me about what you think about yourself, who you are, who do you think you are? Because we want to avoid the misdiagnosis, if I may borrow the idea, that based on what you're telling me as a summary of your problem, I already decide this is the truest representation of your situation. So I would take this young person through a number of activities over a period of time that they at first must articulate in their own words what it is they understand themselves to be, who it is they understand themselves to be, based on however little or more information they have about themselves. And then it enables us to identify the disjunctures, the dissonance, the missing gaps, right? Because when we have identified those, we can then plan a process through which we can go and research that information and try to find out how it fits in as a living process, not just as an act of some sort. Because why do I call it a living process? It must, that new information that we're bringing through must find meaningful attachment to what already exists to fill in the gaps. Otherwise, we are just plastering on the surface. Right? You hear where I'm going with this?
Yeah.
So that process becomes so deep, so spiritual, so emotional, so totality encompassing, as opposed to
I just have an issue deal with, tick that one box.
So you could, I mean, I'm not dissing Western oriented approaches to mental health, but this much I will say without any fear of contradiction, and I will welcome any contradictions. That is why in some instances you will find, and I'm saying in some instances you will find are people consulting psychologists and psychiatrists, and they come back there feeling like, what did I go do there? Because the process does not, I must be very upfront about it. In my understanding of who we are as a people, the process throws the ball back into the court of the patient, the same patient who's not even sure which court they are standing in. Because of the Western orientedness, which is more self-driven, individualistic, whereas in the African way of doing things, your shaman, your healer, those kinds of people would almost walk the path with you without taking over your responsibility. Right? So I mean, I have had incidences, and I've said this to my bosses at the university, that we pay for very good service of psychologists and clinicians who would help our students with group counseling, individual counseling, etc. But I still have students who would come back to me and say, yes, I've been there, but it doesn't feel like there's anything that I've achieved.
Like I'm winning.
Partly
like
in my
stuck.
Yes, I just went there and spoke to this guy, and this guy made notes, and that's it, right? Whereas, again, without taking the response, student or the patient or the client to grow by themselves, you are an enabler as a coach, as a teacher. You create an environment where if the client, student, patient does not see it, you dangle signs for them to then, now I see words.
Now I say yes.
Right? So you find a lot of our people who have medical aids not even using these services because they cannot relate to the ideological, philosophical approach to these services. Whereas uma eseya ugogo Msibi will have again an ancestral DNA genetically coded approach that will resonate
nalomuntu, yes, resonance.
Right? So when I have, as is practically the case, a person who needs that kind of an intervention or assistance to know themselves, you allow them to peel the onion with you creating an environment that is safe for them to feel vulnerable, as opposed to them feeling dumb that they can't put the pieces together.
Like the question where we'll say, why do you think you feel this way?
and I understand where that question comes from, because I am not the person sitting in the clinician's sofa who has a problem. I understand it, but that person at that point in time wonders what the relevance of that statement is in relation to why they have gone there. Remember, I left my house, that Kabeli taxi, went to go see the psychologist for one thing and one thing only, help. I want to walk away feeling empowered. But when you throw in the ball back into my court, I mean, are you dumb? Are you not understanding that I came to you for help.
Yeah.
And now you're asking me the question.
I would have
right?
unpacked.
And there's nothing wrong with that. You know, there's nothing wrong with that question. But I think, right? And I said, for no fear of contradiction, and I will welcome any contradictions.
Yeah.
I think the way in which we want to assist people with their challenges sometimes just adds up to their immediate frustrations.
Yeah.
The intention may be noble in asking the question,
yeah.
but how it's received to the other end may not assist the situation, right? Again, without taking over the responsibility of the patient's client or student or young person. How are you enabling them if you're asking them? Because I mean, surely in my mind, if I knew why I'm feeling that way, I would have dealt with it long before I even came to you.
Yeah.
That's just how I see it.
Yeah. No, I love what you are saying, and I'm already thinking because this conversation was to just lay this foundation of what needs to come. So that we can now say, this is the topic, we're going to unpack it. But in terms of our responsibilities as people to teach in different ways. And when somebody comes to you asking for help, understanding the psychology and understanding the coaching. While I love coaching, because I also the same, more or less the same story. I wanted to be a psychologist, but I got some marks. I ended up in PR looking for anything that has psychology in it.
Yes.
That had, like, okay, what has psychology with my marks? Where can I go? Like, okay, go public relations, PR, and you have a character for it. But when I discovered coaching, what I then love and admired the process that we're gonna take uPhumzile here and move with uPhumzile to la otuya khona. Not to make you feel anything, feel better or unpack emotions. Leave the feelings out of it. But let's see, manje, how do you, if you say the question is, Ningubani, okay, if you want to answer that question, who can answer that question for you in which space? There's paternal, there's maternal, there's family, and all that way. So Sugile, I'm confused. Some I'm confused, like, oh, actually, I can ask somebody and the person can help me. And then from there, like, I like where you started with your dad to understand, this is what can be better for you. Because Lo Muntu has seen you, has seen your qualities, your characteristics, which comes back to, if you want to know yourself and how I see you as part of myself and my lineage.
Yes.
These
And you know,
are the spaces
part of what you're saying brings to the fore another aspect which we haven't touched on yet. Within that same conversation of a young person wanting to know themselves, I will even go as far as saying, I don't really watch television because I don't have the time for it. But I love the thought behind the concept of Khumbule Ekhaya, where you see many of our people yearning to reconnect with who they truly are. And part of who they truly are is about coming to terms with where they come from as part of a people, right? So I'm raising this issue because I want to, shake the tree and see what falls out of it by saying, when you and I and generations before us were growing up, our parents, regardless of what line of work they were in, kept their eyes on us. They may not have done it in a scientifically certain university written research way of doing things. They have not done it that way. But they understood their children so well, but not only their children that they have given birth to, but the children in their space of influence, that they would be able to guide laba bantwana to hopefully a reasonable community positive, community value adding member of society type of an outcome. That you would be able to find umntana whose parents have long died going to any homestead and say, sengifuna ukulobola manje ngicela niyongicelela. Yeah, but without being born in that family, but because this kid has always been on the radar of these community members. Remember what Tina, when we say it takes a village to raise a child, it's not just an idiomatic expression, it's a way of life.
It was a way practical. Yes, we lived it.
Part of the problem with the modernized community is that we have these high walls individualized, and this it is incongruent with our ancestral genetic makeup. It is a huge fight. That is why, in terms of societal status, you want to erect these high walls and have barbed wire so that the what complies with the Joneses. Kodwa the who umdabu wako awuvumelani nalokho. Right? So I think we find ourselves with more and more youngsters wanting to know who they are because to a less or greater extent, for worse or for better, us as young parents who are Western trained in our role of parenting have successfully missed the mark of keeping our eyes on the ball, and the ball being our children, right? And we're doing things just so that we can fit in with the Joneses. And that's at the expense of true nurturing of our children. Because mangabe, we were doing a good job. Our children, I don't live with my kids, Phumzile, you know that. But at every opportunity I get to spend with my children, who are multiple and flung all over this country, the moments I spend is not for me to run around to the malls and spend money so that I buy their affection. The moment I spend with my children, and I know I've been accused for all kinds of things because I'm not doing things supposedly conventional. I spend time conversating with my children. Right. And you know, when there's an opportunity, I mean, I used to do it when they were even a lot smaller. I would take my kids to my road trips, to the camps, to the aerobics marathon, to choir competitions, so that they see themselves in me doing the things that them too can do going forward and do even much more, right? So I think our children more and more want to know who they are, because there is no meaningful expression of what their parents are from which they can take who they are, and we're not transferring anything of authenticity about who we are. Except I want to live driving motor, and that does not, it doesn't help the children. It doesn't help the children. Kanti umangabe endlini zethu we are able to sit down, switch off the television, and just have a conversation. Or when I take my kids from Potchefstroom to their moms in Joburg, that 1.5 hour trip must be filled with conversations. It must be filled with us singing. I mean, I'm enjoying that we're singing. I mean, I love the idea that my kids can sing. All of them can sing. So that one activity of singing in the car and recording is part of who they are.
It's an expression.
Right? It's not about after a long day at school, I let them sleep because abantwana bam shame bakhathele. There's no time for that. It's time to acquire all the necessary skills to survive the unforgiving, relentlessly changing life that we have no idea in which direction it's going, right? So we sing in the car, and I realize part of that is conveying to them who and what we are about, because the music that they listen to, I would ask them about, I mean, so what's about this song? Or when it's my turn to play the music, they'll ask me, when I would African music, and say, because it's part of my self-expression. It's about who I am. I relate more. Look, I do classical music, I do opera, I do all kinds of things, but I equally do mpakanga, I do escatamia, I do in Lesotho there is deporter. There's all kinds of things, because
and all the messages that came with whatever genre at the time, or the emotion or the mental space where classical music takes you, and that imparting that, it's something that you cannot even explain to a person what it means to connect in all your being. Language, be it music, be it dance, be it wow.
Sure. So we started with the question you were raising. So how do we take this young person who wants to know themselves? So there are so many aspects that we can look at, and it's not a short-term process, right? It's not about how long it'll take. It's about how impactful it will be if we do things right. Right? Job shadowing, for example, it's not a new concept, and people thinking,
take girl child.
You talk about job shadowing. It's not a new thing.
Now it's a boy child. Yeah, we used to do
that long ago.
Yeah.
So see, all of these things were part of the fabric that raised a family. Okay, the community that raised the family, because that's how boys and girls were taught different trades and jobs and professions. That's how these things are. So job shadowing, take a girl child, it's not a new thing.
Yeah.
So it becomes a new thing because there's a group. Olden days, I've just forgotten the name of the group. It says as izinto zazikhona from time immemorial. So we're now doing them as if they are new. Tina, sing about, we've been here before
and doing it.
But if we don't understand our history, it's like this is the first time we're here. No. As a people, we've been here before. These disasters, it's not new things. There may be different expressions of challenges. But as a people who've always struggled to survive, or who've always had strife in their lives and overcame, if we were to look back in terms of indigenous knowledge systems, we would find that some of these things too much. If we were in touch with ourselves, we would have found ways, I'm sure, of mitigating, not necessarily getting rid of it, but mitigating the kind of impact it has had. But because we have shifted our focus from where it's supposed to be, we end up with this elongated, overstretched sense of suffering, and our children not even knowing who they are. So in these modern multicultural schools, and the whole question of multiculturalism is not a new thing, by the way, Sissy. We're talking about so many things. In Lokshin, in Bethlehem, where I grew up, in Porch, where I live now, as where to where you grew up, multiculturalism has always been part of what makes us. That is why we're having so many languages in the same conversation, because it's part of our DNA.
True.
So, but in the context of today, we're talking about multiculturalism just because there's abamhlophe, abangenelele, to this space,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And we have now given away our right to influence their entry. We're now letting them, and I'm not talking ill of them, we're only allowing them to dictate how things, for their convenience, things must be done. So multiculturalism is about embracing the non-African, when African on its own is multiculturalism. So we don't get me started. Girl, don't get me started.
I know. Wow. You know what? I love that we've unpacked a lot of stuff in one, discussing who you are, what you do, and that helps this conversation and series going forward. And the question of self, of knowledge of self, because everything else will come from there to say, now this is where we are. Now we have this, like as an example that we started with, how do we move this child forward? Where we're going to talk about social, we're going to talk about profession, we're going to talk about everything. But I think I like how your story and the story came. I had questions and stuff prepared, and now I was just glued.
I apologize.
But the beauty of this, you've answered so many things of why you were this person of interest in the spaces that you go through, what you talk about, how you help people, the impact that you make, all the different elements that I'm so grateful that we're able to take this one big topic. Why is you know, you did it sound like big, global, but you were able to, all the pieces that I needed, and you, yes, to say we need a series, which I knew that it will need a series and the theme. With that, Desmond, thank you so much for allowing me you, and I'm so grateful that you said series. From this, just so that for the next session, I want to take people with us on this. So what can we unpack now to say, now we've spoken about self, we've spoken about us, and how the values of sharing information, be it take a poll child, where it's profession, where it's values, it's beliefs, as abazali, we are responsible for this type of conversations.
Just there, yeah. Remember, the primary educator of a child is umzali. Yeah. So we take our children to schools for the schools to play a secondary role of educating. So if we have not done a good job at primarily educating our children emakhaya, yeah, we will sit with the problem that our schools are confronted by now, where teachers now have to worry about things that they're not employed to do, which is disciplining the children. Yeah. Right? So until we get to the basics which have always been part of a African traditional society, until we get there, our problems are not about to end, right? There's what is referred to as takaning. Takaning is a place where young people get together to learn, but their learning there as community youth is secondary to the primary education that they would have received endly. At the same time, you take it to the next level, that's tertiary education, right? So tertiary in the sense that you're now making sure that the boys who have come, who have evolved from boyhood to are now graduating into manhood, now begin to imagine what roles await them going forward. Equally the girls. So the role
awaits them.
Continue. You know, yes, the role of primary education is in the home. You know, is in the home, and in these spaces we might be digressing, but that's another conversation for another point. Including in these spaces, there never were contestations about which religious view one holds, because those conversations and political aspirations did not find expression there, because they could be by their very nature divisive. So issues of politics and religion and all of that remain part of the primary education of the family. So that when we get to etakaneng, when we get to lebollo, etc., we're talking about what the collective impact of these young people growing up would be to benefit the community, right?
Yes.
Let's get back to where we should be. Let's get back to where we should be. You know, yeah, we will talk about. Look, let's say perhaps my parting shot is this. Where do we go from here? We will not do a good job going forward if we don't talk about who am I? Right? We must talk about that. For me is the first, that's the foundation of all other things.
Perfect.
Who am I? As a tree, I mean, there's a program that I'm accredited to run. It's called Tall Trees. A tree does not change, whether even if the seasons change. So if we plant trees, if we make sure ukuthi abantwana bethu lemimithi ezaziyo kakuhle, when these trees can understand, this tree, a peach tree, will understand that it will not bear apricots. Right? It will not bear an apple. So when we have sorted that one out, it becomes easy for this tree, through the different seasons, know how best to self-express, survive, and excel throughout the seasons.
The core of being. Yes.
That's the story of my life.
Thank you. You know what? I'm just gonna close it right there. You nailed it. Conversations with Desmond will follow. And thank you for joining us. I am closing it just there because it's a continuation. It's not a goodbye. It's not a we're coming back again. Des, thank you so much for this.
Thank you for the invitation, Pums, and looking forward to engaging further with you.
To the next one.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Salute. Bye-bye.
Bye, dear.